Sometimes, the most dangerous power doesn't belong to the loudest voice in the room, but to the quiet woman sitting in the corner, the one everyone believes will never fight back. They saw me as weak, disposable, someone they could crush without consequence. They laughed as they destroyed my career, my reputation, everything I'd built. But the day they underestimated me was the day they signed their own death warrant. Because while they celebrated their victory, I was already planning theirs. And when I was done, they'd have nothing left but the ashes of their empire. My name is Claire Donovan, and until 6 months ago, I believed hard work was enough to succeed in corporate America. At 34, I'd spent the last 8 years climbing the ladder at Stratagem Dynamics, a tech consulting firm in downtown Denver that promised innovation but delivered exploitation. I was a mid-level manager in the strategic development division, overseeing a team of 12 brilliant minds who trusted me to shield them from the corporate vultures circling above. Every morning, I'd arrive at our glass tower on 17th Street by 6:30 a.m., an hour before most employees. The security guard, Marcus, would nod knowingly as I swiped my badge. "Early bird gets the worm, Ms. Donovan," he'd say. And I'd smile, believing it was true. My corner cubicle on the 14th floor wasn't much, but I decorated it with small succulents and a photo of my parents, both teachers who'd sacrificed everything to put me through business school. I lived alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill, 15 minutes from the office. No husband, no kids, just me and my rescue cat, Fitzgerald, named after my favorite author. My colleagues often asked why I didn't date, why I spent Friday nights reviewing proposals instead of hitting Lodo's trendy bars. The truth was simple. I'd convinced myself that professional success would fill the void that personal connections were supposed to occupy. I wanted that senior management position more than I wanted love, more than I wanted friends, more than I wanted anything. Stratagem Dynamics was my religion, and I was its most devoted disciple. I memorized every mission statement, internalized every corporate value. Excellence through integrity, they preached, and I believed them. When CEO Jonathan Reeves gave his quarterly presentations about building a culture of trust and transparency, I sat in the front row, taking notes like an eager student. When Mark Callahan, our sales director, praised my team's performance at all-hands meetings, I glowed with pride. My desk was always immaculate, color-coded folders, labeled binders, a planning board with deadlines highlighted in different colors. I kept detailed records of every project, every email, every decision. "You're too meticulous, Claire." My colleague Sarah would tease, "Nobody cares about documentation that much." But I did. I cared about everything. The Prometheus project was supposed to be my breakthrough. A $50 million government contract to modernize federal data systems, the kind of project that could catapult someone from middle management to the executive suite. When Jonathan personally assigned it to me last spring, I nearly cried with gratitude. "You've earned this, Claire," he'd said, his silver hair gleaming under the conference room lights. "Show us what you're capable of." For 4 months, I lived and breathed Prometheus. 16-hour days became my norm. I missed my college roommate's wedding, canceled dinner plans with my mother, forgot my own birthday. My team worked themselves raw, but I pushed them harder, pushed myself hardest of all. We were creating something revolutionary, or so I thought. Looking back, the warning signs were obvious. The mysterious budget adjustments Mark insisted on, the external contractors Jonathan brought in without my approval, the meetings I wasn't invited to, the documents I couldn't access. But I was too blinded by ambition to see the truth. I wasn't leading the project. I was being set up to take the fall for it. In my small apartment, I had a vision board, magazine clippings of corner offices, Forbes articles about female executives, a printed email from Jonathan praising my dedication. Every night before bed, I'd stare at it and whisper my 5-year plan like a prayer. Senior Vice President by 35, Executive Vice President by 40, maybe even CEO someday. I thought I understood the rules of the game. Work harder than everyone else. Deliver results. Never complain. Trust the system. Trust your superiors. trust that merit would be rewarded. But there was one rule nobody taught me. One lesson they don't include in business school curricula. Sometimes being good at your job isn't enough. Sometimes being good at your job makes you the perfect target. Because competent people who trust too easily, we're the ideal scapegoats for those who've mastered the art of corporate warfare. The last normal day of my old life was a Thursday in October. I remember wearing my lucky navy blazer, the one I'd bought with my first bonus. I remember the taste of my usual vanilla latte, the sound of my heels clicking on marble floors, the way morning sunlight streamed through the office windows. I remember feeling invincible. 24 hours later, that feeling would be gone forever, replaced by something darker, sharper, something that would either destroy me or forge me into someone they'd never see coming. Friday, October 13th. The date should have been my first warning. Jonathan's assistant called me at 7 a.m., just as I was reviewing the Prometheus quarterly report. Mr. Reeves needs you in the executive conference room, immediately. Her voice was cold, professional, nothing unusual. But when I walked in and saw Jonathan sitting at the head of the table with Mark Callahan to his right and our chief legal officer, Patricia Winters to his left, my stomach dropped. Sit down, Claire, Jonathan said, not looking up from the documents spread before him. The same man who'd praised my dedication 6 months ago now wouldn't meet my eyes. Mark slid a folder across the table. Inside were financial records I'd never seen before. Inflated invoices, suspicious transfers, contractor payments that exceeded our approved budget by 300%. My signature was on every document. Digital signatures I'd never authorized. Approvals I'd never given. $8 million. Claire, Mark said, his voice dripping with false disappointment. $8 million in fraudulent charges. All traced back to your access codes, your project authority. I couldn't breathe. That's impossible. These aren't real. Someone forged. The forensic audit says otherwise, Patricia interrupted, her manicured nails tapping the legal brief. Every transaction originated from your workstation, your login credentials, your approval chain. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. They'd been thorough. Bank accounts in my name I'd never opened. Emails from my account I'd never sent. A digital trail so perfect it would have convinced me if I didn't know the truth. We're giving you a choice, Jonathan said finally, his gray eyes cold as Denver winter. Resign immediately, sign this NDA, and we won't pursue criminal charges, or fight us, and we'll ensure you never work in this industry again. Either way, you're done here. You're framing me. The words came out as a whisper. The Prometheus project, you and Mark, you've been... Mark laughed, actually laughed. Who's going to believe that? The desperate woman caught stealing, trying to blame her superiors. Check the company message board. Claire, the news is already out. He turned his laptop toward me. The internal forum was exploding. Breaking strategic development manager caught in $1 million fraud scheme. Below it, hundreds of comments from colleagues I'd worked with for years. People calling me a thief, a disgrace, a typical example of why women couldn't handle power. You have 10 minutes to clear your desk, Patricia said. Security will escort you out. The walk to my cubicle felt like a death march. Conversations stopped as I passed. Some people stared openly, others pretended to be absorbed in their screens. Sarah, who'd joked about my meticulous records just weeks ago, wouldn't look at me. David from IT, who I'd helped get promoted, turned his back as I walked by. Security had already boxed my belongings. They wouldn't let me touch my computer, my files, my 8 years of work. Just the personal items, the succulents, the photo of my parents, a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest manager," that my team had given me last Christmas. As they marched me through the lobby, I saw them in the glass-walled executive conference room, Jonathan and Mark, standing with the rest of the leadership team. They were laughing, champagne glasses in hand at 9 a.m. Mark caught my eye and raised his glass in a mock toast. The security guard at the front desk, Marcus, who'd greeted me every morning for years, wouldn't look at me as he took my badge. I'm sorry, Ms. Donovan, he whispered, but he stepped back like I was contaminated. Outside on 17th Street, holding my pathetic box of belongings. I stood frozen as Denver's financial district buzzed around me. Men in suits brushed past, talking about mergers and acquisitions. Women in pencil skirts hurried to meetings that mattered. Nobody noticed the woman whose entire world had just collapsed. My phone vibrated. A text from my mother. Honey, why are people calling me about you being fired for stealing? Then another, from a number I didn't recognize. Saw the news on LinkedIn. Always knew you were too ambitious for your own good. LinkedIn. I opened the app with trembling fingers. Someone had already posted about it. Corporate fraud at Stratagem Dynamics. Manager caught red-handed. 300 reactions. 50 comments. My professional reputation. Built over a decade, destroyed in minutes. I made it 2 blocks before I had to stop. Ducking into an alley between 2 office buildings, I set down the box and gripped the brick wall, trying not to vomit. Through the executive conference room windows, 3 floors up, I could still see them celebrating. They thought they'd won. Thought I'd crawl away quietly. Disappear into obscurity while they carved up the Prometheus project's real profits. The millions they'd siphoned that they were now blaming on me. Standing in that alley, watching papers from my box scatter in the October wind, something inside me broke. But sometimes things need to break before they can be rebuilt into something stronger. Something dangerous. I picked up my phone and did the only thing I could think of. I called the one person who'd warned me about Stratagem Dynamics years ago. My law school roommate. Amanda. Now a white-collar crime attorney. Claire? I heard what happened. It's all over. They framed me, Amanda. And I'm going to destroy them. There was a long pause. Then, come to my office. Don't talk to anyone else. And Claire? Start documenting everything you remember. Everything. As I gathered my scattered belongings, a text came through from an unknown number. A photo of the champagne celebration, taken from inside the conference room. Jonathan and Mark, laughing as they clinked glasses. The subject line of an email visible on the screen behind them. Project Prometheus, Phase 2, Implementation. Someone inside had sent this. Someone who knew the truth. I wasn't as alone as they wanted me to believe. The first week after my destruction, I didn't leave my apartment. I lay on my couch in the same clothes for 3 days, watching my savings account drain as automatic payments hit, rent, student loans, car insurance, without my salary. I had maybe 2 months before I'd lose everything. The rejection emails came in waves. Every company I'd applied to suddenly had no openings. One recruiter was honest enough to tell me why. Nobody wants to touch someone involved in federal contract fraud. Claire, even if you were innocent. My phone became an instrument of torture. Former colleagues unfriended me on social media. My professional network, carefully cultivated over a decade, evaporated overnight. The worst was a LinkedIn message from my first mentor. I'm disappointed in you, Claire. I really believed you were different. By day 4, I couldn't afford to keep wallowing. I forced myself to shower, to eat something besides stale crackers. That's when I found the eviction warning slipped under my door. My landlord had heard about the scandal. This building has a reputation to maintain, the note said. 30 days to vacate. I sat on my bathroom floor and cried until I couldn't breathe. Then I cried some more. The woman in the mirror looked hollow, dark circles, cracked lips, eyes that had lost their light. This wasn't supposed to be my story. I was the good one, the rule follower, the believer in justice and hard work. Amanda tried to help, but without concrete evidence, we had nothing. Their frame job is too good. Claire, without proof of what really happened, no prosecutor will touch this. She offered me a loan, but I was too proud to take it. Pride, the only thing I had left. Week 2 was worse. My credit card started declining. The repo notice appeared on my car. My mother called crying, saying reporters had shown up at her school. My father. suffering from early-stage dementia, kept asking why I wasn't at work. I told him I was on vacation and hated myself for lying. I started selling things. My business clothes went first. What use were designer blazers to someone blacklisted from corporate America? Then, my jewelry, my laptop, anything worth money. The pawn shop owner recognized me from the news. "Mighty fall for someone like you," he said, offering half what my things were worth. By week 3, desperation turned into something else. I'd lie awake at 3 a.m., imagining Jonathan's house burning down, fantasizing about Mark's car crashing. These weren't plans, just the revenge fantasies of someone with nothing left to lose. Then I found it. I was packing my apartment, going through old files to shred, when I discovered a USB drive I'd forgotten about. A backup from 6 months ago. When EAT had updated our systems, just routine files, nothing special. Except it had the original Prometheus project budgets. The real ones. Before Mark's adjustments, my hands shook as I plugged it into my ancient personal laptop. There it was, proof that the budget had been altered after my initial approval. Not enough to prove the whole conspiracy, but enough to show something was wrong. That night, I made a decision. I wrote it in my journal. The one thing I hadn't sold. They think they've broken me. They think I'm nothing now. No job, no money, no future. They're right about the first two. But they're wrong about the future. Because when you have nothing left to lose, you become dangerous. They took everything from me with lies and forged documents. I'll take everything from them with the truth. I don't want my old life back. That woman was weak, trusting, naive. She believed in fairness. She believed powerful men would reward loyalty. That woman is dead. Someone new is being born from her ashes. Someone who understands that in this world, you don't get justice. You take it. Jonathan Reeves, Mark Callahan, you celebrated too early. You should have made sure I was completely destroyed, should have followed through with the criminal charges, had me arrested, locked away. Instead, you let me walk free, thinking shame would be enough to keep me down. That was your first mistake. Your second was underestimating how much a person can learn when they have 24 empty hours a day and nothing but rage to fuel them. I'm going to learn your systems, your weaknesses, your secrets, every corrupt deal, every dirty dollar, every skeleton in your corporate closet. You turned me into nothing. But nothing is invisible, nothing can slip through cracks, nothing has nothing to lose. I swear on everything they took from me, I will watch their empire burn. And when they're standing in the ashes of everything they built on lies, when they've lost every dollar they stole, every connection they cultivated, every ounce of power they wielded, I want them to know it was me. The woman they dismissed, the nobody they laughed at, the victim they created. This is no longer about clearing my name. This is about something purer, simpler. Revenge. That night, for the first time in 3 weeks, I slept peacefully. Not because my problems were solved, but because I finally had a purpose. In trying to destroy me, they'd created their worst nightmare. Someone with their inside knowledge, nothing to lose, and all the time in the world to plan their downfall. I opened my laptop and began researching. First, everything public about Stratagem Dynamics finances. Then, Jonathan Reeves's history, Mark Callahan's connections, Patricia Winter's legal record, every board member, every major contract, every potential weakness. The eviction notice on my table gave me 23 more days in this apartment. 23 days to begin architecting their destruction. It would have to be enough. Day 24 of my new existence. I sat in a coffee shop on Colfax Avenue, nursing a single black coffee for 3 hours while using their Wi-Fi. My laptop screen showed 17 tabs of research, SEC filings, government contract databases, LinkedIn profiles of every Stratagem executive. That's when she walked in, Emily Rhodes, investigative journalist for the Denver Post, 28 years old, Columbia journalism degree. And according to my research, currently investigating corporate malfeasance in federal contracting. I'd been watching her for a week, reading every article she'd written. She had a pattern, same coffee shop every Tuesday and Thursday. Always the corner table. Always working alone. I waited until she was deep in her work before approaching. Emily Rhodes. She looked up, suspicious. Journalists knew how to spot sources and threats. Who's asking? Someone with a story about stratagem dynamics, the real story. Her eyes sharpened. Claire Donovan, I know who you are. The manager who stole $8 million. The manager who was framed for stealing $8 million, I corrected, sitting down uninvited. While the real thieves are stealing 10 times that amount. Every criminal says they're innocent. I pulled out the USB drive. Original Prometheus budget files, dated 6 months ago. Compare them to what Stratagem filed with the government last month. You'll see discrepancies that can't be explained by legitimate overruns. She didn't take it. Why me? Because 3 years ago, you wrote an exposé on Defense Tech Corp that Stratagem killed before publication. Jonathan Reeves personally threatened your editor with pulling all their advertising. You had to watch your work disappear because of their pressure. Her jaw tightened. You've done your homework. I have nothing but time and motivation. Look, I know you don't trust me, but verify everything yourself. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to investigate. If I'm lying, you'll figure it out quickly. But if I'm telling the truth, then it's the story of the year, she finished. She took the USB drive, turning it over in her fingers. What else do you have? Not enough. Yet. But I know where to look. I need someone with press credentials, someone who can ask questions without raising suspicions. Someone with protection a private citizen doesn't have. Emily studied me for a long moment. You look like hell. I've lost everything. Job, reputation, home. In 6 days, I'll be evicted. So yes, I look exactly like what I am. Desperate. But desperate people do desperate things. And right now, I'm desperate enough to do whatever it takes to expose them. This is about revenge. Yes, I said simply. But revenge and justice aren't mutually exclusive. They destroyed me using illegal means. I want to destroy them using the truth. She pulled out her laptop, inserted the USB drive. Her eyes widened as she scanned the files. These numbers, if the filed versions are different, they are. Check for yourself. She was already typing, pulling up public databases. Holy shit. The discrepancies are. These aren't just overruns. This is systematic inflation. She looked up at me. But this isn't enough to prove intentional fraud. I know. That's why I need your help, and why I have a plan. I pulled out a notebook filled with my research. There's a pattern. Every major contract stratagem has won in the past 5 years shows similar irregularities. Always just under the threshold that triggers automatic audits. Always using the same network of subcontractors. Always with Jonathan and Mark's signatures. You think this goes back 5 years? At least. But here's the interesting part. I flipped to a page of highlighted names. 3 former employees tried to raise concerns. One was fired for performance issues. One was transferred to the Seattle office and quit within a month. One died in a car accident. Emily's eyes met mine. You think they killed someone? I think it's worth investigating. His name was Thomas Chen, senior auditor. Sent an email to the board expressing concerns about accounting irregularities 2 days before his accident. Single car, ran off the road, no mechanical problems found. Jesus. She was taking notes now. Rapidly typing. If even half of this is true. I have more. Employee testimonies. People still inside who are too scared to speak publicly, but will talk off record. Access patterns showing Jonathan and Mark accessing systems outside their normal purview. A paper trail of offshore accounts that I can't fully trace but can prove exist. 1. How did you get all this? Some from my own records. I kept copies of everything. Always have. Some from sympathetic former colleagues who've reached out secretly. Some from public records and careful analysis. And some. Let's just say when you're trained in their systems for 8 years, you know where the bodies are buried. Emily leaned back. You're asking me to take on one of Denver's most powerful corporations. They could destroy my career like they destroyed yours. They could. Or you could destroy them first. Win a Pulitzer. Become the journalist who exposed Colorado's biggest corporate fraud. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I'll need everything you have, every document, every lead, every source. And Claire? If you're playing me, if this is some elaborate lie, it's not. I stake what's left of my worthless reputation on it. She almost smiled. All right. But we do this my way, carefully, methodically, legally. No hacking, no stealing documents, nothing that could invalidate the story or get us sued. Agreed. But Emily, they're not going to just roll over. When they realize we're onto them, they'll come after both of us. Let them try. I've been waiting 3 years for another shot at Stratagem Dynamics. She pulled out a business card, wrote something on the back. This is my secure email. Send me everything tonight. And Claire, find somewhere safe to stay. If they figure out you're the source, I'll be careful. As I left the coffee shop, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Not for redemption or restoration. That ship had sailed. But hope for something better. Retribution. Emily Rhodes was my weapon now. And together, we were going to burn Jonathan and Mark's empire to the ground. The abandoned office building on the outskirts of Denver became my base of operations. Emily had arranged it. A friend's failed startup space, still with working internet but off everyone's radar. I'd officially disappeared after the eviction, letting everyone think I'd left Colorado in shame. Instead, I was 10 miles from Stratagem's headquarters, digitally infiltrating their world. My days blurred together. Coffee at 5 a.m. If you could call instant coffee mixed with tap water, coffee. Then 12 hours straight, staring at screens, following digital breadcrumbs through Stratagem's operations. I'd lost 15 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. Living on ramen and determination. The breakthrough came at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday. I was reviewing procurement contracts when I noticed something. A vendor called Nexus Consulting Solutions that appeared on every inflated project. Registered in Delaware, no real address, no employees on LinkedIn. A shell company. I dug deeper. Nexus's bank records were hidden, but their registration documents weren't. The authorized signatory was a name I didn't recognize, Robert Henley. But Robert Henley's address? That was interesting. It was a property owned by Mark Callahan's wife's maiden name, Sarah Winters. My hands trembled as I connected the dots. Nexus was Mark's personal funnel. Every inflated contract sent money to Nexus for consulting services that were never performed. I traced 17 projects over 5 years, $43 million. But I needed more. Knowledge without proof is just conspiracy theory. That's when I remembered Kevin Martinez from IT. He'd been fired 6 months ago for budget cuts. But I knew the real reason. He'd asked too many questions about unusual server access patterns. I found him through LinkedIn, working at a computer repair shop. We met at a 24-hour diner in Aurora. Kevin looked nervous, constantly checking over his shoulder. I can't be seen with you, Claire. They made me sign things. NDAs don't cover illegal activity. Kevin, what did you see? He pulled out a cigarette with shaking hands. Jonathan and Mark had me create ghost accounts in the system, admin-level access, but untraceable to them. They said it was for security testing. Do those accounts still exist? As far as I know. But Claire, accessing them would be... I'm not asking you to do anything illegal, just... If someone happened to know those account names, and if that person happened to guess the password structure you always used for test accounts. Kevin stared at me. You're playing with fire. I'm already burned. What's left to lose? He wrote something on a napkin, slid it across. I was never here. You never saw me. The account names were innocuous. Sys, Test, Zo3, Maint, User, Zo7. The kind IT departments create and forget about. That night, I tried various password combinations based on Kevin's patterns. On the 37th try, I got in. The system opened like a flower. Not full access, I wasn't that lucky, but enough to see transaction logs, email metadata, file movement patterns. Enough to watch them in real time. I started documenting everything: screenshots, transaction IDs, timestamp correlations. Emily needed admissible evidence, but I needed to know where to point her. Every night, I'd send her sanitized leads, things she could investigate through legitimate channels. Look into Nexus Consulting's government filing discrepancies. Check the timeline between contract awards and property purchases by Stratagem executives. FOIA request for communication between Stratagem and the Department of Defense's Procurement Office. The fear was constant. Every car that drove by the abandoned building made my heart race. Every unexpected sound sent me diving for the lights. I kept a go bag by the door. Fake ID Emily had helped arrange. $500 in cash from pawning my last valuable possession, my grandmother's ring. And a burner phone. 3 weeks into my surveillance, I saw it. An email metadata showing Jonathan scheduling an emergency meeting. Subject: Project Prometheus audit concerns. The FBI was sniffing around. They were getting nervous. Good. I watched them try to cover their tracks. Mark accessing offshore banking sites. Jonathan's assistant booking flights to non-extradition countries. Patricia Winters pulling files from archives that hadn't been touched in years. But the best part was the paranoia. They'd turned on each other. Mark's emails to his lawyer. Carefully worded, but clearly exploring how to shift blame to Jonathan. Jonathan's secret meetings with board members, probably spinning his own version of events. The empire was cracking from within. One night, I got careless, stayed logged in too long, got too comfortable. A security alert popped up. Unusual access detected. They'd noticed the ghost account. I had minutes, maybe less. I grabbed every file I could, initiated mass downloads, screenshots flying. My hands moved on autopilot while my mind screamed warnings. They'd trace the IP, find the building, find me. I got out with my laptop and go bag just as headlights appeared in the distance. Ran through the empty lots, through the industrial district, until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. Collapsed behind a warehouse, watching SUVs circle the abandoned building I'd just fled. They knew someone was watching. They didn't know it was me. I texted Emily from the burner. They're spooked. Whatever you're going to do it soon. Her response: article drops tomorrow. Front page. Be ready. I found a motel that took cash, no questions asked, paid for one night, knowing that by tomorrow, everything would change. Sat on the bed, laptop open, watching Stratagem's internal communications explode with panic. An emergency board meeting was called for 6 a.m. Jonathan's assistant was booking crisis management consultants. Mark was transferring money between accounts. I smiled for the first time in 2 months. They could feel the walls closing in, but they still didn't know how much we had. Tomorrow, they'd find out. Tomorrow, their empire would begin its public collapse. The article hadn't even dropped yet, but I knew how to make them dance. At 4 a.m., I sent an anonymous email to Jonathan from a throwaway account. Check your Cayman account, the one you think nobody knows about. Transaction 447829. The FBI knows too. Then to Mark. From a different account. Jonathan is ready to pin everything on you. He's already talking to prosecutors. Your window is closing. I didn't have access to their Cayman accounts. Didn't know if that transaction number even existed. But they didn't know what I knew. Paranoia would do the rest. By 5 a.m., their internal communications were chaos. Mark was trying to call Jonathan. Jonathan wasn't answering. Patricia Winters was emailing the entire executive team about maintaining unified legal strategy. Someone had already started shredding documents. I could see the security logs showing after-hours access to the records room. At 6 a.m. sharp, Emily's article went live. Breaking: 8-figure fraud. Suspected at Denver tech giant Stratagem Dynamics. The headline was perfect. Not accusatory enough to trigger immediate legal action, but damaging enough to start an avalanche. Emily had woven together public records, unnamed sources, and financial discrepancies into a narrative that demanded investigation. I watched from my motel room as Stratagem's stock price opened down 12%. Their PR team's response was textbook. We are reviewing the allegations and cooperating fully with any investigations. Translation: we're scrambling. But I wasn't done. Phase 2 of the trap was more delicate. I created a fake LinkedIn profile, Sandra Mitchell, senior auditor looking for work, connected with a few random people in the industry to look legitimate. Then I sent Mark a connection request with a message. We should talk about Nexus Consulting. I have documents Jonathan doesn't know about, interested in a deal. Mark, panicking and suspicious of Jonathan, took the bait. His response came within an hour. Who are you? What do you want? I played it carefully. Someone who knows you're being set up to take the fall alone. Meeting tonight. Denver Art Museum parking garage, level 3. Come alone or the FBI gets everything. Meanwhile, I sent Jonathan a similar message from another fake profile, claiming to be a board member's assistant with information about Mark's exit strategy. Different location, Union Station parking structure, same time. They'd both show up. They were too scared not to. Emily had a photographer stationed at each location. When Mark and Jonathan each arrived at their respective empty parking structures, looking for ghosts that didn't exist, we had them. Photos of panicked executives meeting no one, looking guilty, paranoid, trapped. The images would run in tomorrow's follow-up story, but the masterstroke came from inside Stratagem itself. You see, I hadn't been the only one watching. 3 employees, people I'd protected when I was their manager, people who remembered, had been quietly documenting everything since my termination. They'd seen the truth and were waiting for their moment. At 3 p.m., while Jonathan and Mark were in emergency meetings with lawyers, those 3 employees simultaneously submitted whistleblower complaints to the SEC, the FBI, and the Department of Justice. Detailed accounts with documentation they'd been collecting. The complaints referenced Emily's article, adding credibility to both. By 4 p.m., federal agents were in Stratagem's lobby with warrants. I watched the live stream on Denver Post's website from my motel room. Agents carrying boxes of documents, computers seized, Jonathan being led out in handcuffs, trying to hide his face from cameras, Mark in a separate car, already pointing fingers based on his lawyer's statement. Patricia Winters was smart. She'd immediately flipped, becoming a cooperating witness in exchange for immunity. She knew where every body was buried and was ready to dig them up to save herself. But I'd saved the best for last. That evening, I sent Emily one final piece, audio I'd recorded during my last week at Stratagem. Colorado was a one-party consent state, and I'd been part of the conversation. Jonathan and Mark, discussing how to handle the Claire problem, explicitly planning to frame me for their crimes. I'd recorded it thinking I might need it for a wrongful termination suit. I never imagined it would become evidence in a federal fraud case. Emily called me, breathless. Claire, this audio. This is a smoking gun. This proves conspiracy, obstruction, false statements to federal investigators. This changes everything. Run it, I said. Are you sure? Once this goes public, you'll be in the spotlight. They'll come after you legally, personally. Let them. I want them to know it was me. I want them sitting in federal prison, knowing the woman they destroyed is the one who put them there. The next morning's headline was even better. Exclusive audio, Stratagem executives caught planning frame-up of whistleblower. The stock price plummeted 40%. Trading was halted. The board called an emergency meeting and voted to terminate Jonathan and Mark with cause, stripping them of their golden parachutes. $40 million in combined severance packages, gone. Federal prosecutors, armed with Patricia's testimony and the audio evidence, upgraded the charges: wire fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, false statements, each charge carrying up to 20 years. Mark's wife filed for divorce that same day, freezing their assets. Jonathan's country club revoked his membership. Their names became toxic in Denver business circles. I sat in my cheap motel room, eating cup noodles, watching their world burn on my laptop screen. No champagne celebration for me like they'd had. No crowd of supporters. Just silence and the glow of news reports. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. They destroyed you. Now you've destroyed them. What's next? I knew the answer. Tomorrow. I'd start rebuilding. Not my old life, that was gone forever. But something new. Something forged in the fire they'd put me through. But tonight? Tonight I'd watch them fall and feel absolutely nothing but satisfaction. The Denver Federal Courthouse had never seen media coverage like this. Every major outlet, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, The Wall Street Journal, had sent crews. The stratagem scandal had become national news, a symbol of corporate greed and corruption. Day 1 of the trial. I sat in the gallery, 3 rows back, wearing a simple black suit I'd bought from a thrift store. Jonathan entered first, his silver hair now gray, his confident stride replaced with shuffling steps. His legal team surrounded him like Secret Service, but they couldn't protect him from the photographers capturing his fall from grace. Mark came separately. No more designer suits, his assets were frozen. His court-appointed attorney looked overwhelmed, carrying boxes while Mark stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. When his eyes swept the gallery and found mine, he stopped. For 3 seconds, we stared at each other. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just held his gaze until he looked away. Emily sat beside me, press badge prominent, typing notes. "You ready for this?" she whispered. "I've been ready since they destroyed me." The prosecution's opening statement was devastating. Armed with Patricia Winters' insider testimony, the whistleblower reports, and my audio recording, they painted a picture of systematic fraud spanning half a decade. $63 million stolen from taxpayers, shell companies, offshore accounts, forged documents, a conspiracy that reached into every corner of Stratagem's executive suite. The defendants didn't just steal money, the prosecutor said, holding up my photo. They destroyed anyone who might expose them. Claire Donovan was their most dedicated employee until she became their biggest threat, so they eliminated her, not physically, but professionally, personally, completely. When they played the audio recording in court, the room went silent. Jonathan's voice, clear and cold. "Claire's too thorough. She'll find the nexus discrepancies eventually. We need to move first." Mark's response, "The fraud angle is perfect. She's so obsessed with documentation. We'll use it against her. Forge her signatures, create the trail, then act shocked when we discover it." Jonathan again, "Make sure it's airtight. I want her so buried in legal problems she won't have time or resources to fight back." Several jurors looked disgusted. One shook her head. Jonathan's attorney objected. Authenticity, chain of custody, relevance, all overruled. The audio was authenticated by 3 experts and legally obtained. On day 3, I took the stand. "State your name for the record." "Claire Donovan." For 6 hours, I testified. Every detail, every meeting, every red flag I'd missed. The prosecutor walked me through the destruction of my life. The public humiliation, the eviction, the blacklisting. She had me read from my journal entry, the one about revenge. "Ms. Donovan, did you seek revenge?" "No, I sought justice. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Revenge would have been destroying them the way they destroyed me, with lies. I used the truth." Mark's attorney tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee, a woman scorned, someone who'd orchestrated an elaborate frame-up of my own. But every accusation fell apart against the evidence. Bank records, email timestamps, witness testimony from 17 current and former employees who'd come forward. The moment that broke the case wide open came on day 5. Patricia Winters testified for 8 hours, detailing every criminal act she'd witnessed. She brought receipts, literally, printed emails, recorded conversations, photographs of documents Jonathan and Mark thought they'd destroyed. Mr. Reeves once said, Patricia testified, that Claire was too clean, too honest. He said those kinds of people were dangerous because they actually believed the company rhetoric about integrity. He laughed about it. But the true coup de grace came from an unexpected source. Marcus, the security guard who'd taken my badge that last day, testified that Jonathan had asked him to delete certain security footage from the night before my termination. Footage that would have shown Jonathan and Mark accessing my computer after hours. Marcus had kept a copy. The prosecution played it. There they were, using my login credentials, uploading forged documents to my account, creating the digital trail that would destroy me. Timestamp, 11:47 p.m., October 12th. 8 hours before they'd accused me of fraud. Jonathan's attorney called no witnesses. Mark's called 2 character witnesses who were torn apart on cross-examination. The defense's closing arguments were desperate, appealing to reasonable doubt. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Jonathan Reeves, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, obstruction of justice, making false statements to federal investigators, recommended sentence, 15 to 20 years. Mark Callahan, wire fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, recommended sentence, 12 to 15 years. As the verdicts were read, I felt nothing. No joy, no relief, just emptiness. It was over. But I was still destroyed, still blacklisted, still alone. After court, Emily found me sitting on the courthouse steps. You did it, Claire. You brought them down. No, I corrected. They brought themselves down. I just made sure everyone saw it happen. She studied me. What now? This story's going to win me a Pulitzer. Your name will be cleared. Companies will want to hire you. No, they won't. I'm the woman who brought down Stratagem Dynamics. Nobody trusts a snitch, even a righteous one. So what will you do? I stood, looking at the Denver skyline where Stratagem's logo was already being removed from their building. Something else, something different, something where I make the rules. As I walked away from the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. I didn't answer. Let Emily tell the story. My part was done. That night, local news led with footage of Jonathan and Mark being led to federal prison in shackles. The anchors called it Colorado's largest corporate fraud case in a decade. I watched from my motel room, then turned off the TV and opened my laptop. Started researching business licenses, LLC formations, consulting frameworks. If corporate America wouldn't have me, I'd build something outside of it. They'd meant to destroy me. Instead, they'd freed me from the system I'd been trapped in. The system that had betrayed me. 6 months later, I walked through downtown Denver on a crisp March morning, my footsteps confident on the same streets where I'd once fled in shame. The city looked different now, not because it had changed, but because I had. My consulting firm, Phoenix Risk Assessment, had just signed its 10th client. Companies hired me to find their vulnerabilities before someone else did. Who better to spot corporate fraud than someone who'd been framed by the best? My tagline was simple. I've seen the worst. Let me protect you from it. The irony wasn't lost on me. The skills Stratagem had taught me, the betrayal they'd put me through, had become my greatest assets. Every manipulation tactic they'd used, every loophole they'd exploited, I now use that knowledge to help honest companies protect themselves from predators like Jonathan and Mark. I passed the building that used to house Stratagem Dynamics. It stood empty now. A for lease sign spanning 3 floors. The company had dissolved 2 months after the trial, its reputation too toxic to survive. 800 people lost their jobs. I felt sorry for them, the innocent employees who'd been collateral damage, but empires built on lies always fall eventually. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Won the Pulitzer. Celebration drinks? I smiled and texted back, Congratulations. You earned it. We met at the same coffee shop where we'd first conspired. She looked different too, confident, established, wearing success like armor. You know, she said, raising her coffee cup in a mock toast, They're teaching our case in journalism schools now. The power of investigative reporting, the importance of protecting sources, all that. And in business schools, they're teaching it as a cautionary tale about corporate governance, I replied. Funny how the same story has different lessons depending on who's telling it. Speaking of stories, Emily leaned forward. I heard Jonathan tried to hang himself in prison last week. I set down my cup carefully. Did he succeed? No. Suicide watch now. Mark's in solitary after getting beaten by other inmates. Turns out nobody likes rich executives who steal taxpayer money. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity. They were just names from another life now. Do you ever regret it? Emily asked. How it all went down. I regret trusting them. I regret believing that hard work and loyalty meant something in their world. But destroying them? No. They made that choice when they destroyed me first. You're different now, she observed. Harder. Stronger, I corrected. I learned that nobody's coming to save you. That justice isn't given. It's taken. That the only person who'll fight for you is you. We sat in comfortable silence, watching Denver's business district buzz with afternoon energy. Men and women in suits hurried past, probably heading to meetings where they'd promise integrity while planning betrayal. The game continued, just with different players. I got an offer, I said suddenly. A company in New York wants to buy my firm, 8 figures. Emily's eyes widened. Claire, that's incredible. You'll take it. No. No? But that's life-changing money. I already had my life changed, by force. This time, I'm choosing my own path. I stood to leave. Besides, my work isn't done. There are more Jonathans and Marks out there, more Claires being destroyed. Someone needs to level the playing field. As I walked back to my office, a real office now, with my name on the door, I passed a young woman crying on a bench, holding a box of office supplies. The same devastated look I'd worn 8 months ago. Fired, laid off, betrayed. I stopped, pulled out my business card, and handed it to her. When you're ready to fight back, I said. Call me. She looked up, confused, mascara streaking her cheeks. Who are you? Someone who's been where you are, someone who survived it. I left her there, knowing she might call or might not. But if she did, I'd teach her what I'd learned. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the making of you. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest weapon you can have. The Denver skyline stretched before me, glass and steel monuments to ambition and greed. Somewhere in federal prison, Jonathan and Mark were counting days that would stretch into years. They'd probably spend that time blaming each other, blaming me, blaming everyone but themselves. But I wouldn't waste another moment thinking about them. They'd already taken enough from me, my career, my reputation, my innocence about how the world really works. They wouldn't get my future too. My phone rang. A potential client, another company that suspected internal fraud. I answered with my new standard greeting, Phoenix Risk Assessment. We find the truth before it finds you. As I took the call, I caught my reflection in a building's glass doors. The woman staring back wasn't the eager, trusting manager who'd believed in corporate fairy tales. She was someone harder, smarter, forged in betrayal and tempered by revenge. They'd underestimated me once. That was the day they lost everything. Nobody would make that mistake again. Because the most dangerous person in any room isn't the loudest or the most powerful. It's the one who's lost everything and survived. The one who's learned that rules are for people who have something left to lose. The one who knows that sometimes the only way to win is to burn it all down and rise from the ashes. They created me, and I would be their legacy, a warning to every executive who thought about destroying someone just because they could. The day they underestimated me truly was the day they lost everything, including the power to ever hurt me again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Claire's position? Let me know in the comments.